The Nerdcast Empire is on the air. It is Nerdcast Thursdays on the Nerdcast Empire. I am Matt in the studio once again. Thank you to everybody joining us live on Twitch as we continue on with our live podcast on twitch.tv/NerdcastEmpire. Of course, you could be watching this on the VOD. It's possible you could be watching this on YouTube. We post our VODs over on YouTube as well. And then, of course, we put our podcast on our podcast network as well, which will happen later on this evening. But for everyone here live, welcome. We're going to be talking anime on this episode of Nerdcast Thursdays, and specifically our trip to Animazement, which was wrapped up this past weekend and probably just about done with wanting to drive in the mountains anytime soon. But overall, it was a really outstanding weekend. Joining me in studio to just talk all things anime on this Anime Thursday, or Nerdcast Thursdays. We're kind of rebranding it a little bit. It's Mike. Mike, how's it going?
Always rebranding. You know, something's eventually going to stick, so it's not a big deal. And it just kind of gives us that flexibility to talk about whatever's on our mind, which this week, obviously, we have Animazement, which was both last year and this year a tremendous convention. Definitely one of the best I've attended. And, you know, just whatever else is going on in the world of anime. Let's talk about it.
And I think we're going to be spending most of these Thursdays talking anime, but there are some video game topics that I know have kind of been piling up that we would like to get to, so we will probably use our Thursday show for that, as well as maybe some even generic music topics as well that we can bring to this Thursday. So we got a lot to talk about, and Chris joining us in the chat tonight. He'll be joining us again on Sunday for our Music Weekly show, so it'd be great to have Chris back with us. But Chris did not go with us to Animazement, but we'll get his thoughts in the chat throughout the night. Of course, you can check out our website, nerdcastempire.com. You can check out our store while you're there. And, of course, you can get this podcast wherever you get your podcast each and every week. Usually 2 podcasts a week, one around Thursday and one around Sunday. Before we get into the Animazement stuff, though, some other anime news. We'd like to start off with a news item kind of off the top, and some really kind of exciting news for anime fans broke, I believe, while we were either on the way to or while we were in Raleigh, North Carolina. And that's the news that Toonami is bringing back a rewind block that will air on Fridays, or will start on Friday from 5 to 7 p.m., and it'll be every Friday. And they're going to be bringing back some classic shows. Mike, I know you had a chance to kind of look at the release. Tell everybody what they can expect on this rewind block.
Yeah, pretty interesting. Starting at 5 p.m., running until 7 p.m., we're looking at Sailor Moon, an hour of Dragon Ball Z Kai, and then Naruto. So definitely some heavy hitters there coming back to Cartoon Network.
You know, Chris is excited in the chat for Toonami. We're always excited for more Toonami. And it's going to be the Viz dub, I believe, of Sailor Moon, which is not the original Deke dub that aired when the show originally aired back in the 90s. Yeah, I'm sure that one's probably not going to hold up very well for many reasons at this point. But I think people are really excited about Sailor Moon making a comeback. I think it's great to have some shoujo anime, especially that one, which is kind of the linchpin of shoujo anime in the 90s. I think there's a whole generation of people that grew up with Sailor Moon. The Dragon Ball Kai decision, interesting, because obviously there's been so many Dragon Ball Z dubs and everything that has come out, but Chris kind of reflecting what some other people were saying about this, kind of disappointed maybe that it's Kai, not the original Z. I can kind of understand to some point, especially when you're only going once a week, that, you know, as Chris mentioned, you have the 17-episode build-up to the fight. This is going to be a little bit more to the point. Kind of just curious about your thoughts on the one with that version.
You know, a couple thoughts on that. I think maybe if it was a weekday thing and not just Friday, I could see maybe running with the original Dragon Ball Z. I think the other thing to consider, too, is it's been widely believed that people's attention spans aren't nearly what they used to be 20, 30 years ago. So I can't help but think that maybe running with Kai is kind of with that in mind, that, hey, we're giving you one show a week or 2 shows a week of this. I don't know if we expect you to hang through 17 episodes of Powering Up. That might be a lot to ask any newcomers, because I mean, Sailor Moon and Dragon Ball Z both definitely gateways to a lot of people our age and younger. I gotta think they kind of hope a similar thing will happen this time around if there are still people watching cable television. Let's not play it slow here. Let's get to the excitement.
Well, and let's also not overlook Naruto, because I think there's definitely a younger generation that shows like Naruto, shows like Bleach were really linchpins of the Adult Swim / Toonami lineup and got a lot of people in the door. And I think that's another good show. What will be interesting to see, obviously, is how well this does in the ratings. Friday is kind of a dead time in the afternoon, so really almost a low risk, high reward kind of time slot here. But I think it's also an opportunity to, hopefully for anime fans, to stop bickering online about this, because that's what anime fans do. That's what everybody does, fandom.
You'll find that in any fandom, for sure.
Absolutely. But hopefully people will tune in, because there are a lot of shows from that era, I should say, that would make a good, retro type of show. You think of shows like Magic Knight Ray Earth, you think of shows like Slayers, you think of, obviously, even Cowboy Bebop, bringing it back, Trigun. You've got a lot of shows from that time frame that would really make for a good retro type show that would bring some eyeballs. And again, be that gateway even in 2024. And potentially some other shows that are a little bit newer at this point that maybe they could get from Crunchyroll or High Dive for a relatively low rate, because they're maybe not moving a ton of DVDs at this point. But it's a good chance to maybe get some people into some shows. To me, it's really exciting news.
Yeah, and I think you're going to find that some of these shows really are timeless. And I think they'll translate to a younger audience if they actually do tune in. And yeah, to your point, I'm holding out hope that we get Kids on the Slope on Cartoon Network before too long. High Dive needs to get on that.
I don't know. They probably sell way too many copies of that to want to give that
sold
away.
At least one recently. So.
That's very true. But you think of a show like Escaflowne. Obviously, Funimation did a really great redub of that with the new remaster. That would be a show, I think, that
they won't let them use the Funimation dub.
Well, it's
I'm guessing.
Well, I imagine they will, because the other dub is not complete, because obviously there were...
and they still show Full Metal Alchemist, I think, from time to time, so that wouldn't be a problem either, I suppose.
But, that original Ocean Group dub, and honestly, if you have the Ocean Group version of that show, that's a great dub. Definitely check that out. I think if you're a fan of Inuyasha, you're going to recognize a couple of the main voices in that show right off the bat.
Yeah.
I've only seen one episode of the new dub of that, but... the old dub is really good. But yeah, there are a lot of shows from that era. You think of a show like Razafon, that obviously was an ADV show. That's another show that is getting up there in age, but I think could appeal to some sci-fi type of people. So we'll see. I mean, this has got to do well, and you're starting out with big heavy hitter shows. So if it is going to do well, these are the shows you want to start out with.
I assume these are shows that still, to some degree, move a lot of merchandise as far as any retailer that sells anime apparel. So yeah, it can't be a bad idea to start with these. And honestly, like the 90s shows, they just have a style all their own, and I think that's something that the more retro-minded people will definitely get into.
It's interesting because some of that came up even at Animazement when you talk about that period right at the end of Cell Animation, when you started getting into the DigiPaint, which kind of led to what we have today. It's certainly an interesting time. But yeah, definitely check that out if you're a fan of anime. Coming up on Fridays from 5 to 7, starting tomorrow. So if you're, as we record this on May the 30th, or if you're listening live, May the 30th. So tomorrow, 5 to 7 Eastern, check that out on Toonami on Adult Swim. I think it's going to be really great to see. But let's get into talking about Animazement, and we're going to kind of go as best we can in chronological order through the weekend, because it was definitely an interesting weekend. We spent 4 days on the road. We left on Thursday early in the morning, got into Raleigh in the afternoon on Thursday. It was about 10 hours in the car down, about 8.5 to 9 back. So we actually made a little better time back because we didn't hit rush hour traffic. But Raleigh, North Carolina for us involves driving basically into southeastern Ohio, through most of West Virginia, in through the mountains, into Virginia, into North Carolina, and then over to Raleigh, which really the hour on either side, maybe hour and a half on either side of that trip are pretty nice, and then the middle of just not great. It's just lots of mountains. But overall, like, the drive down was pretty uneventful. Your normal stops. It did take us some time because we ran into traffic and we came in. But we got there. We were able to get into town. first thing we did when we got into town was to go check out a restaurant that was just outside of the downtown area. And man, that was maybe some of the best food we had all weekend. Mojo's, was that the name of it? I believe.
Moe's Burger Joint.
Moe's Burger
I believe.
Joint. As Rachel joining us in the live chat, and yeah, she's right. West Virginia is a rough drive. It was just one of those that if the weather's bad at all, it's just going to be a giant pain to get through there. Mojo's Burger Joint in Raleigh, North Carolina. So that's definitely worth checking out while you're there. I got what was called the carnivore burger, which had cheese and bacon on it, and it was really fantastic. You got a breakfast burger, if I remember right.
Yeah, it was pretty fantastic. Had a fried egg, bacon, cheese, cream cheese as well. Just kind of an odd mixture, but really good. The chips and queso I had was also outstanding.
Yeah, it was probably too much food, but it was great because I wanted to have the milkshake too because they had a Cinnamon Toast Crunch milkshake, and I did not get a chance to check that out. But it was really good food. Definitely check that place out. I would say off the beaten path, but you kind of had to look for it. We had to drive in. Parking lot's pretty small. Probably best to hit on a time where they're a little bit off as far as like dinner time would be kind of tough to get in there. Probably we had to wait about 10 or 15 minutes to get in the door, but overall it was really good. Then after a quick stop at the grocery store, we were able to come back and get our badges, which, one thing I have to say right off the top, and then we'll get into maybe some general thoughts before we get into the Friday, but I was impressed all weekend with the organization of Animazement. We've been to a lot of conventions. I was at Anime Expo the year. It had like 80,000 people there. We've been to small conventions and big conventions. I would say generally Animazement is about as well organized as you can get. They really know what they're doing, the way everything's laid out, the way things are done. I can't remember very many times all weekend that there was an extensive line for any kind of registration. Like, it was, to me, it's about as good as you can do. It's clearly the people that run that convention know what they're doing because they've got it down to a science at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Even as far as like just having the cordoned off like lanes essentially, where it's like, yes, you go this way, no, you don't go this way, with their security people there at the convention center basically herding you in the right direction to both kind of keep things flowing, but also as a way to keep badged people where they need to be as opposed to people who don't have a badge. It's smooth.
And it made the getting into rooms a lot easier because they knew that if you'd gotten past those checkpoints, you had a badge. And so that made things really easy. But yeah, I can't really say enough good things about Animazement. Overall, it's just, I don't know why every convention can't be like this. Like, I think that's the frustrating part for me is that, we go to some local conventions. Obviously, OhioCon may never come back, or at least not in that same form or fashion. But none of the OhioCons, none of the Matsuri cons. I love Matsuri Con. It's a great con. None of those cons have ever even come close to the depth and quality of programming. Literally, there is something there for everybody.
Yeah.
If you like whatever it is that you like about anime fandom or Japanese culture, Animazement's got a track of panels and guests for you. I think that's the best part is there were very few times where there's really nothing going on. I can't tell you the last time other than last year's Animazement where I said that about a convention.
Yeah, and I rarely ever leave a convention thinking, man, I kind of wish I would have seen this panel or this panel. Most of the time that just isn't an issue for me, but I could basically go through the schedule on Guidebook for Animazement and pick out an entirely different slate of panels and attend those instead of what I did attended and still had a good time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. It's crazy how good that convention is. But let's kind of go through day by day, and then we'll go through Friday, and then I think we'll set up a break for our podcast listeners. But start off on Friday. Of course, we were already into town. We stayed at the Sheridan, Raleigh, downtown. Really nice hotel. No real qualms other than the fact that I wish that more hotels had some sort of free breakfast option. It's not a huge deal, but it's one of those things you're going to have to hunt for breakfast because they just don't have anything there. Now, having said that, we found a really nice breakfast place as well. on the trip, and I'll have to look up the name of that because I did not write that down.
Yeah, it was a decent little walk away from kind of the convention center area, but definitely good food.
Big Ed's City Market Restaurant, which was, it was about maybe a 10-minute walk from where we were. That's how we started our Friday and Saturday, and then we eventually came back to McDonald's on Sunday just to have something quick. But I think anytime you're in a city, when you can come away with a meal for like $10 or less, or around $10, I think you've done something right. And this was a place that had really good breakfast. So we were able to both eat there both Friday and Saturday. But, kind of getting into the convention, there were some panels early on Friday that we wanted to check out that I thought were really outstanding. The Anime History 90 to Now, I do want to comment on this one because I thought it was good overall. Like I thought,
certainly.
I don't think there was any panels we went to that I thought were bad other than their rip-off Anime Hell panel, which was just not good.
We can talk about that still, too.
Yes, but there are a few things about that Anime History panel that I thought the guy running it, who I was very knowledgeable, did a really good job. I would consider what I'm going to say constructive criticism, not like, you got to be...
Who decides if it's constructive or not? The person saying it or the person hearing it?
I think you can only make it from the person saying it, because how somebody takes criticism, you can't control.
Sure.
Like, but to me, it's constructive because I think like he's got a B minus panel that could be an A plus panel.
If I said, "Hey, don't be so awful," could you take that constructively?
I don't think you meant that constructively.
Maybe not.
I think that is clear in that case that it is not.
Maybe I just don't have that strong of a vocabulary. Maybe my way with words isn't quite where it needs to be, and that was meant to be constructive.
Then you probably shouldn't be in a position where you're giving advice.
I don't talk to people publicly for a living.
I think in tennis you do that. So I think you do a pretty good job of being constructive with your criticism in tennis.
Really knowing your audience, who you can tear down and who might just drop their racket and leave if you do.
Right. And then whether you want them to do that or not is a totally different issue.
That is also a thing.
But getting back to the 90s panel, the one criticism, if I had one, was I thought there were a couple of eras that he kind of glossed over. Like he kind of, I don't want to say made light of the era with like the Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya, and of course he played the Open or the Lucky Star, and kind of made a joke of it. And I think I can understand if you maybe weren't there in the convention scene at that time, how you might look at that, looking back on it, and feel that way. But man, like we were at Otakon in 2008.
It was huge.
That was everywhere. There were people either talking Lucky Star or they were talking Haruhi Suzumiya, and then of course we went to the one panel where they gave out this
sang it. That's the most recent.
Yeah,
Haruhi Yukai at Animazement. So it clearly had an impact on people.
Yeah, I think it's okay to realize that maybe it's a genre that you don't care for, and I totally understand that the cute girls doing cute things genre.
I wonder if maybe with that guy in particular, and maybe some other people, they kind of see that as that was what was popular when everything went to crap.
And that could be.
Like you equate it to kind of the bubble bursting in 2008 unfairly, because that was basically still kind of what was left that was successful at that point in time.
Yeah.
When nothing else was sticking, that was okay.
And and it's weird because he did get into some of the reasons why the anime bubble burst. The fact that you had ADV licensing everything under the sun and clearly overspending on some properties because they were trying to keep up. They were looking for that Dragon Ball Z at that time. They were looking for that show that was going to set them, because honestly, if Funimation doesn't have Dragon Ball Z, who knows if they make it through that period either. But they luckily had the Bell Cow show, and I think EDV thought Evangelion was that, and because they had different versions of that, and then I have the platinum version or whatever it is, and they were really good, but it's one show, it's one it wasn't 700 episodes and 70 video games and 48 movies. Like, unfortunately, it just wasn't that. Because everything Dragon Ball that comes out, people just go nuts for, even today.
Evangelion was never going to have the same broad appeal as something like a Dragon Ball Z. Even to people who are obsessed with it, which there are some, like it's not even. Yeah, I get it's not a kid show necessarily, so it can't be Dragon Ball Z, but it's not even on that level of like blockbuster over here, like the Star Wars series or something like that. Like it was never going to appeal to everybody, and it wasn't designed to. But that was the thing they had and the thing they had to try to milk for all it was worth.
Yeah. So it's like, the one thing I came out of that panel thinking is that I could run a panel like that, and I don't want to say I would do better, because the first time you run a panel, it might not be better, but I feel like when I start looking at anime panels that we can put on, that is one that is at the top of the list. So maybe we'll do a podcast on that at some point with a little more detail. Maybe it'll turn into an anime panel, but looking forward at the schedule on that Friday. What else kind of stood out to you on that Friday?
Oh, well, there was also the 10 years later panel, Animazement 2014, which was kind of a neat historical look back at what was popular then, even if in some cases they were shows that I've watched in the past year or two because I've been slowly catching up. One of the shows that was brought up during that panel, Hozuki's Cool-Headedness. I'd never heard of that, but it actually sounded really cool and sounded like something I'd want to watch. Basically, the way the guy described it was like The Office only set in hell, where like the main character is basically a dude who's kind of like the best employee within the bureaucracy that is all the different hells across all the religions. A really interesting concept. I definitely want to find the first season of that and check it out.
Yeah, it definitely sounded interesting. It was a little depressing to see some of these shows that were now 10 years old. It's like, oh, like that show's old now. Like that's kind of sad. But that's anytime you do one of those kind of panels, you're going to run into that. One of the more interesting panels I think we watched all weekend was the Try Your Hand at Subtitling panel. Eric Zhang ran that. And clearly, it was almost like he didn't know he was going to be running a panel. He kind of put it together at the last minute, but it was so fascinating because he got into more of the specifics of what goes into making subtitles, how it has to be different than the direct translation. What are some of the limitations on character lengths in a line, and how long it has to be on the screen, and lead-in times and lead-out times, and different companies having different standards and having to know what those standards are, or even different countries. So you mentioned he was a lot of work in like the Asia Pacific region, and they have different standards than the U.S. market. And that's one of those panels that on the schedule, maybe a lot of people looked at it and didn't think that sounded interesting. Like that turned out to be one of the most fascinating panels of the weekend, because even though I kind of knew some of that stuff, like to have somebody really tell you, and the fact that he was trying to have people at the panel like subtitle this like 4-minute short that I have a feeling he would have been able to do in the time of the panel. Yeah. But it was still really fascinating, the whole process.
I love that there was this weird implying that we all knew some amount of Japanese, because as he was going through that guy's subtitling, he was just like, that line there, you think that's okay? What's wrong with it? I don't know, man. Like, you tell me what's wrong with it. I haven't the slightest idea what this guy's talking about. But yeah, about the subtitling, it's funny, I'd never really considered before how, and it makes all the sense in the world, you want it to be concise because you don't want people not paying attention to the actual animation. Like, you don't want them having to read the entire thing and never looking up from that. Yeah, it makes sense. I just never really considered it.
Yeah, and I think that's when people get all worked up about, oh, that's not a direct translation or whatever. Like, I think that is one thing you have to keep in mind is like they want you to be as short on the subtitle as possible so you can get back to the action. They want the action to tell the story, even if maybe you don't know every word that they say. That should lead you to what's going on in the show.
Well, I think also that's why it looks even more peculiar when things are altered for subtitles that just actually adds material to it that isn't there. It's like, wait, no, that's counterproductive. Like, just give me the bare minimum. Don't implant some other set of words that had no place there to begin with.
But it's all kind of based on what manga is, and it's something I remember from a panel years ago. Basically talked about how the Japanese kind of believe you should be able to pick up a direct manga without being able to read Japanese and understand what's going on by just looking at the pictures on the page, as compared to American comics, which are much more dialogue-driven and less about the art driving the story. It's just that's kind of one of the general differences between the two, and I think that carries over to anime. So they want you to spend as much time on the screen as possible. But that was really, again, fascinating panel. I love any kind of educational panels like that, so I'm definitely all down for that.
I thought the Q&A with Hiroshi Nagahama was really good, too.
Yes.
Someone who I wasn't super familiar with his work, but to hear him kind of going into his career and how he got into like key animation and kind of the explanation of the importance of it on a show like Yawara, judo anime, and then also talking about the theme song to Mushishi, which I thought was just another thing I never would have considered before.
Now, we saw his Q&A on Saturday.
Oh, was it on Saturday?
Because he was at the same time as the subtitling panel on Friday. But yes, that the 100% was very interesting. And the story about the Mushishi Open really blew my mind, because if you've ever watched the show, which I have, and it's amazing, and everybody should watch it, but the opening theme is just so not an opening theme. It is very slow. It's the Sore Feet song by Ali Carr, I believe, is the artist. And I had no idea why that song was like that. I mean, it kind of fits the show. Like, the show's kind of an easygoing type show. So I thought, well, maybe that was a thought. Kind of like what the Delgados did The Light Before We Land for, I just lost the name of the show, Gunslinger Girl.
Yeah.
Kind of something different there. But it turned out, he's told the story that basically he wanted to try to appeal to people who aren't necessarily anime fans, and he was trying to fool them into not turning the channel. So he had them find an English artist and create this song that didn't sound like an anime open, hoping that people would leave it on long enough to get sucked into the anime and not know it was coming. So that was the entire reason why. So kind of blew my mind. Like, well, you know what? That makes a ton of sense when you think about it, especially for a show like that is so not anime. Like, it's so just it's very story driven, and I think something that would definitely appeal, especially in Japan, to like an outside of anime like circle of people. So, but yeah, that dude was really great. And again, guy that started off as an animator and in between animator, in fact, and started to have ideas about directing, and they're like, well, why don't you direct? And then eventually but he seems like somebody who's really engaged in the process, and I think that's what made him so interesting.
Yeah.
I guess the other real big thing to talk about I can't remember if we went to the trivia challenge on that Friday or we went to a later trivia. We went to a couple of different trivia events throughout the weekend.
I want to say Saturday, but I don't know.
I think it was, because I think we didn't get into the Friday one. We did go to one of the AMV contests. I think, did we go to both of them, in fact?
Yeah, I believe we did.
AMVs were certainly interesting. Song choices were very interesting. But overall, I mean, it was AMVs, so most of those were good.
Yeah, I always kind of feel like they need to add some restrictions or criteria to those just so you can judge them on a more level playing field, because I couldn't imagine, even if I was some sort of expert AMV creator, I don't know how it's possible that I could objectively score them if someone just uses a song I hate. Like,
yeah.
I don't know how you separate, like, hey, I can get into this because I like the music, and, oh, God, this is terrible. Why are you subjecting me to this?
Yeah, it would be tough for sure, and it just wasn't enough Fallout Boy for me.
No.
That is like the quintessential, or Rob Thomas.
Yeah, I think the closest we had was Panic at the Disco, maybe, on one of them. That was about the best we had.
But good stuff there. We're going to get ready to take a break for the podcast listeners. You're listening live on Twitch. We're great to have you along with us for our Nerdcast Thursdays. We're talking Animazement, and what a great time it was. We're going to talk about our Saturday coming up, and we're going to talk about things we got from the dealer room, and then we're going to wrap up talking about our trip back, which was certainly very interesting. As we had a very interesting stop on the way back, which turned into a very interesting interaction. But great to have you along with us on this Nerdcast Empire. If you're listening on the podcast, we're going to step aside for a break. We'll come back with more on the other side of this timeout here on the Nerdcast Empire. Back on the Nerdcast Empire, live on Twitch. Matt and Mike with you in the studio. Don't forget to check out our website, nerdcastempire.com. This is episode 63 of our podcast. We are closing in on the 1-year mark. That'll be coming up in July. We'll have something. I don't know what we're going to do for that yet. We'll have to figure that out before we get there, but that'll be coming up in July. We'll be back with you on Sunday night, regular time again for our Music Weekly, Sunday at 7. We're going to be talking the music of May the 17th, I believe. Mike has started to pull the music for that. And
I'm going to try to.
We're going to try. That does not fill me with confidence, but we will, as we always do, find 6 songs for you that we can spotlight. And, of course, we'll go into the vault as well coming up on Sunday. And then we'll be back 1 week from tonight. This will probably be our normal time for our Thursday podcast for a while. We've got tennis practice, which has pushed us back, but we'll be kind of in this time slot coming up. And I believe we're only a couple weeks away from another Wrestling Premium Live event. We did not do a show for King and Queen of the Ring because we were on the road. there's a lot of interesting wrestling news. I think NXT was as good as it's been in a long time this week. So we probably at some point need to talk wrestling again. Clash at the Castle's coming up in a couple of weeks. We will have a show for you after Clash at the Clash at the Castle. That's AEW's Clash at the Castle.
I love that.
Clash at the Castle coming up in a couple weeks. We'll have a live show for that one as well on Twitch, and I think that'll be Rachel's first chance to be live on Twitch with us for that. So I still need to get her a microphone, so that is something I need to put on this list.
She's pretty loud without a microphone. It'll be fine.
We'll see if she's still in the chat or not, whether she comments on that or not. But, yep, she's still there. She hasn't heard your comment yet because she's still excited. But we're very excited for that, and that'll be coming up in a couple of weeks here on the Nerdcast Empire. We're talking Animazement this week on our Nerdcast Thursdays, and we'll kind of get over to Saturday before we start talking about merch. I thought it started off with another really interesting panel at the top of the day, talking about mecha anime in the 90s and early 2000s. There's a bunch of shows I had heard of, but couldn't tell you anything about. The guy was a little late to his panel, unfortunately, but honestly, the dude knew his stuff. And for the first time ever running a panel, I thought he really did a good job. He does lose some points for being late. But one thing we learned this weekend that we will take in, and it will be very valuable knowledge for us before we go do a panel at the convention.
Really rule number one for running a panel, I think. It doesn't get talked about, but I think I know what you're going with this.
Is you've got to make sure you have a local copy of your presentation. Yes. Like, you just cannot count on the internet at a convention to work. Now, I will say, they did have Wi-Fi at the convention center. I was pretty well connected all weekend, but in that moment where you're trying to download something for your panel like 5 minutes before and your internet doesn't connect, that is a kind of panic that most of us haven't had since we left school.
Yeah, I mean, that is like presentation day in high school or college. Why would you put yourself through that again as a working adult running a panel for fun at an anime convention?
Yeah, lesson learned for all those out there wanting to run an anime panel. Have a local copy of everything. Don't assume the internet's going to work for you. But no, overall, I think the dude knew his stuff. Again, that was an interesting... I think there were a few shows I was expecting to show up on his list that didn't. Shows... I mean, even like Razafon is kind of a giant robot-ish.
Yeah.
But overall, I thought he did a really good job once he got there and got started.
Yeah, it's always interesting sitting in on a panel where it's so specific, like this one particular subgenre of anime, and hearing someone who's just ultra passionate about it. I like mecha, but I don't think I really share the same enthusiasm that this guy has. But it's still refreshing to hear someone speak to something that they care that much about. I find it kind of similar to one of the conventions years ago where I think we caught part of a Sonic the Hedgehog panel, and wow, those people were just rabid about it. And, full disclosure, I was a Super Nintendo kid. Like, I've never really understood Sonic the Hedgehog as far as the fandom goes. There was that, and there was another one years ago talking about the Tales of series, which, again, classic RPG series. I know a lot of people love it, and those fans were just rabid. It was so cool.
Yeah, no question about it. But good panel, definitely worth checking out if you ever see it run at a local convention near you. Next was the Inoue and Inoue Anna songs with Kikuko Inoue, who's of course a legend in the anime industry, has been in a million roles. Probably best known, maybe for someone in my generation, as Belle Dandy from Oh My Goddess, but has played a ton of roles like that. And her daughter Honoka, who I didn't really know of before this weekend. They did a karaoke set, which I thought was really cool. The set list started off with the Sailor Moon theme, followed by the ending theme to Dragon Ball, Idol, which I'll tell you what, Honoka sang that song, and I give her full marks for that because that is not an easy song to sing, especially by yourself, especially live. Like, that's a tough song, and she nailed it. I thought
the vocal range between the verses and the chorus is just so weird.
Yeah,
just like, that's challenging.
Yeah, she did a great job. And then they did Blue Water from Nadia, which was great. Then Hada Hada Yukai, as you mentioned. Then Bluebird, which is a classic, and then closing out with Cruel Angel's Thesis. But for something that you just don't know what that's going to be like that was an awesome panel.
Yeah, it was really cool. And kind of my takeaway is that if if you're a Japanese voice actor or actress and they invite you to or want you to come to these conventions, this is just a no-brainer panel to run because these are songs that you probably already do karaoke to begin with, if not, in obviously some actors' instances might be songs they legitimately sang at some point in time, but like with here, they've probably done these karaoke numerous times, so why not just do it in front of like 100 people at a convention? It's a slam dunk.
And people are going to be excited. It doesn't. I mean, they did a great job, but it could have been less than a great job, and people would have still been excited to see it, and they killed it as well. But yeah, I think of someone like Diana Garnett, who we've seen on multiple occasions at conventions. She comes in and does a panel very similar to this, and it's always a lot of fun, and she's just a ton of fun. So
also, the original Dragon Ball ending might be one of the best songs from the whole Dragon Ball series.
Yeah.
Just tremendous.
Yeah, it totally fits the show. The visuals for something that was done in 1986, just outstanding.
Yeah.
Like they really nailed that. It's a classic. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. Kind of trying to see what we went to next. I think maybe the Freestyle Anime Game Show might have been the one we ended up seeing.
We went to the 2024 Anime Music Challenge, I believe.
Okay, that
was the Fatal Fanatics show that we took in.
So, and that was, they did a great job of that. I thought that was probably the second best trivia thing that we went to all weekend.
Yeah, I like what they did with this. I like the idea of just having an individual contestant as opposed to trying to manage multiple contestants at one time. I think kind of having just set categories that go one after another is definitely easier to manage than Jeopardy-style trivia. The groups that Animazement has that kind of seem to be their featured panelists, they all kind of knock it out of the park.
Yeah, and I think we had two trivia things we saw on that Saturday, and they both did it differently, but I think they both used methods that any convention could replicate. I think it was really well done. That was one of them. We'll talk about the other in a little bit. Then we went and saw the Hiroshi Nagahama Q&A, which, as we mentioned, was really outstanding. I wanted to get it. We saw the Shoujo Rock Heaven one next. It was the same time as I'm Not Old, main characters over 30, which would have been kind of fun. But we saw the girl rock band one, and I thought that's one of those ones where not only did I think it was a good panel, but I kind of came back thinking, it would be nice to feature some of those bands on one of our podcasts because there's a lot of really good girl bands that are coming out, especially out of Osaka, as it turns out. But all over Japan, like, it's amazing the talent level of some of these groups.
Yeah, I hate it in a way because I feel like we don't have that same kind of infrastructure over here where music, and specifically rock music, is so de-emphasized that you don't have kids growing up wanting to be in rock bands or having music clubs in school that then spawn their rock band on the side. For a country so much smaller than ours, I feel like their music scene is just thriving in so many areas where ours tends to get much more narrowly focused.
And as we talked about on the music show this past week, if you had a chance to listen to that, this new wave is kind of being driven by Bocchi the Rock. You have so many people who saw that show and wanted to start their own band. And I think as more of that comes out, I think we're going to continue to see that trend because that is still incredibly popular over there.
I mean, you haven't had that here, I don't think, since Zack Attack and Saved by the Bell. I mean, if that didn't make you want to rock, I don't know what would. And I don't think we've had a lot of that since.
It's been kind of lacking for sure on American television, which is really, really a shame.
I did also want to highlight the karate demonstration.
Oh, yeah.
We did take that in. It was the same dojo that ran it last year. And first off, I give them a lot of credit for doing it because that's not an easy thing to do, especially in front of an anime crowd. I think it's hard to sell basic self-defense to those people. And I think that's, if I was going to get critical, I think that's where I would go with that, is that if I was going to do any kind of martial arts presentation for the anime group, it would have to be something I could tie in to some sort of shonen anime, or at the very least be flashy enough where people walk away saying, wow, that was really cool. Because, yeah, I mean, not that practical self-defense isn't great. Everyone should learn it. But it's not fun to watch if you're not doing it. I think that's an issue. And I think you also kind of need that really charismatic dude leading the demonstration. And while I don't doubt the skill of anyone of the four that were running this panel. They didn't have that showmanship element to them, I guess, where it really kind of got you excited about it.
I think, I understand their theory about we don't break boards because boards don't fight back. But when you're coming to an anime convention and you're trying to compete against, we were literally competing against another panel that was going on in the same ballroom. There was some sort of like food and drink panel or something for anime.
That or it was the sake one, maybe?
Yeah, it might have been the sake tasting. But it's like, if you're going to compete, like, you got to do something flashy.
Even they should have combined the two, honestly.
That would have been very interesting. But I think you bring somebody in that can break some boards or do something like that. Rachel still has her boards she broke in Taekwondo, she says.
And about the board breaking, yeah, I agree that boards don't hit you back, but you need that kind of metric of accomplishment besides just earning a belt. It's just there's some satisfaction in seeing the board snap in two.
Yeah.
That's a cool feeling, and I think that's why you do it, is it kind of gives you that visual, kind of tangible, like, hey, you have progressed.
Yeah, I agree with that. But overall, I think they've improved over year to year. I thought they put on a better panel this year. I think they, it's something they're going to continue to do. Hopefully they'll continue to work on the presentation part of it. But yeah, I'd totally forgotten about that. But it was again, an improvement for sure. I think the next major panel we went to was a panel that ended up kind of being an interesting group because we kind of made connection with them on Sunday at the dealer room, was how to hunt anime and video games. And the guys, Joe Schmo and Boxu-chan, have their like channels where they talk about anime and video games. Talk about really, I think we've known about the video game side of it. It was interesting to get the details on kind of how anime physical releases specifically are becoming more valuable because they're becoming harder to come by. But that was one of my favorite panels of the week as far as fan panels go. And kind of talk about the panel first, and we'll kind of get into making a connection with those guys on Sunday.
Yeah, the panel was really interesting. And I think if you're not someone who looks at this stuff on YouTube, which, since the pandemic especially, I've watched a lot of videos regarding physical game collecting. So it's like I knew that for especially games like DS and 3DS, well, more so DS and Advance, you run into a lot of fake copies of games, especially Pokemon. That's just a huge thing. So like I was kind of already aware of some of that, but I think it's good to get that message out to more people when you can. Some of the prices for some of those games, like the fact that a game like Little Samson is so expensive, I have no interest in playing that game, so I'll never get into that. I thought it was funny that they kind of highlighted some of the more popular gaming YouTubers, which I think some of them can be a bit divisive because you kind of, when you're talking to a bunch of collectors and then you say, hey, watch these channels of these guys that are essentially like flippers of games, it doesn't always, you kind of feel bad about that, but it is what it is, and they do create interesting content. It's
interesting because I feel like when you talk about flippers, it's kind of the difference between like the flippers that were from Texas, Joe, whatever, I can't remember their names. Whatever show it was, I'm sure maybe Rachel will remember who I'm talking about. They run the show on HGTV or whatever, but they were like
the Gaines family.
Yes, that's them. Where it was very much like home down to home. It wasn't like, didn't feel cutthroat. And then you had other flipping shows where it was like these people were just out for blood.
Those shows were way more entertaining than they should have been.
100%. Yes, Joanne and Chip Gaines. Like it just felt like they were just like people you just meet at the grocery store and like just. But I feel like the video game thing's the same way. You've got people that are really honestly into it because they love games and, man, I could sell this, but I'm going to hang on to this because I really love this game. And it's like the people like, I'm going to buy this. I'm going to go to this, flea market. I'm going to get these games. I'm going to turn around and flip them that same day.
And selling them for well over price charting prices. I get that it is a real business that you can make a lot of money at, but to me, it kind of goes back to the whole, I don't think I could bring myself to go to Goodwill to find video games. I would feel weird doing that.
I 100% agree with that. But it was an interesting panel, and as it turned out, we kind of hooked up with those guys again. We'd actually hooked up with them already in the dealer room. I didn't realize that until we saw them at that panel. I don't remember if there were any other panel. I think that was pretty much it. Oh, no, we went to the last trivia thing. So let's talk about that. Because that was basically like your typical pub trivia. Basically, they just had 4 categories of well, we're supposed to be 10 questions each. You end up with 11 in one of the categories. And you basically could have a team of up to 6 people. You'd write your answers down, then they'd trade the answers, they'd score them, and then, you'd have a winner at the end of the night. Very rudimentary, but totally effective, and honestly something that we could absolutely replicate here on Twitch once we get an audience that would be interested, or even, maybe we could all play along. But I thought that was just, like, why aren't more conventions doing that? Because it's a great way to get a group of people together. You get your friends together. You go sit in on this trivia panel. And, the trivia wasn't hard. I think you could make a harder version of it. But I think because of that, it probably made everybody feel like they had a chance because, like, the questions were fairly easy.
I think the questions were really well constructed because it was fairly easy to get about 8 of them right each round, with, like, 1 or 2 kind of being the curveballs that maybe you don't get. Like, I get in the one round, like, if I watched all the popular anime, I would know the character from My Hero Academia. Like, that's fine. But at the same time, I was probably one of the few people in the room that knew the Voltron theme when we got to the 80s show, which is amazing because I don't think I've heard that song in probably 30 years at least. But, there was always that one question that could trip you up, like Aeon Flux on MTV.
Yeah.
That was an answer to one of the questions. Just a lot of easy stuff, but then those kind of, the old separate the men from the boys questions, so to speak.
And the Backstreet Boys was not any of the answers, as it turns out. Like, it's not a real thing, but
and the wings were real.
You have to pay. But no, I thought that was really outstanding. So that was one of my favorite panels of the weekend. And again, 2 different trivias on Saturday, but I think both done in a way that it's very easy to put together and very easy to play along with, which I think
it's one of those kind of trivia style games where it would have been cool to have, like, the OhioCon roast room where they always bring out the round tables and have people sitting around them. I think that would have been good for that as well.
Yeah, no doubt. I think being kind of in a small room kind of limited that. But again, really, really well done. But,
yeah, for sure.
But then, the last thing we did on Sunday before we took off was to go back to the dealer room, and this gives us kind of a chance to talk about what we got from the dealer room. And I do want to start with, I mentioned those guys that ran that panel, and so there wasn't a ton I was looking for from the dealer room. I did kind of want to look through the anime collection. We stopped at the discotheque table. I picked up a couple things. You picked up a couple things. We can talk about those in a minute. But every so often we'll go through the dealer room and I'll just see something that just is so out of left field that, like, I have to buy it. So we went to this one booth and they had what appeared, I thought at the time, to be albums of soundtracks of Slayer's movies and OVAs. I'm like, well, this is kind of interesting. So I went to pick the one up, and then, I was like, I may get this. And then, after a couple minutes, it kind of dawned on me that it wasn't an album. It was actually a Laserdisc.
A Laserdisc.
Which is crazy, because I have not used Laserdisc technology in many, many years. But it also was just kind of neat that it was, like, clearly in great condition. So the first day we went in there, I bought one, and then I went back and got a deal on the other 3 that they had left. So I have 4... the Slayer's the movie, and then 3 of the other OVA Laserdiscs. I still need to find a Laserdisc player, which they're out there. But that was just so out of left field that I did not even. What would even make you think to get those? But after having been in that panel, it's like those guys clearly found something they thought might move.
Yeah.
And probably got a decent price on them, and they honestly I got them for fairly cheap. But it was just. How bizarre was that to find Laserdiscs of Slayers of all shows? I mean, that show could have been any show, and I wouldn't have even been interested. But the fact it was Slayers, like, okay, like that's one of my all-time favorite shows, so I picked those up. But then we went to the discotheque table. I picked up Magical Girl Lyrical Nanoha, the first season and 2 of the movies from discotheque, which I've been meaning to buy. I knew I hadn't bought them. Turned out the first season was currently out of print, so it worked out well that I picked that up. And then I think the next season's coming soon. But that was all I got. But I know you picked up some stuff over the weekend as well. Kind of talk about what you grabbed.
Yeah, it would have been difficult to walk away from the discotheque table without picking up something, considering all of the licenses they've picked up and released media for lately. I've been a physical game collector for a while, and not until just recently have I really thought about picking up my efforts to collect physical anime and movies, just because I don't know if it's just a sign of my age, but there's something reassuring about having it in my hand, I suppose. Like knowing that no matter what happens, I can just pop it in the player and I'm good to go. So with that in mind, I did pick up the 1997 Berserk on Blu-ray.
That'll make Chris happy.
Yeah, it's one I saw it a long, long time ago. I definitely need to check it out again, and I heard the special features, including the outtakes, are really cool. So I definitely want to take a look at that. Another show that I actually already own on DVD, but when I heard they were bringing it out on Blu-ray, I wanted to get that, is Cromartie High School. Just hilarious show. Recommend it for everyone. Another kind of similarly aged show that I didn't own, but kind of wanted to go back to see if I would still enjoy it as much as I did the first time around, is Genshiken.
Yeah.
I got that at the first season and the OVA, I believe. So I definitely will watch that again. And then finally, one that I didn't know they were ever going to license and release. I was a big fan of the Kenichi series, and just a couple years ago, evidently, they released this, and I was so totally unaware of it. But the OVA, The Attack of Darkness, Kenichi.
Nice.
Definitely another one that I want to take a look at so I can finish that. And yeah, the other thing I picked up was I'm always on the lookout for any kind of Dragon Quest related merchandise. So I found another little, blue slime light. So I picked that up as well. So
Also got a couple things for
the niece and nephew, our co-host Rachel's children. Always on the lookout for Pokemon for them, and picked them up a couple plushes, a Charmander and a Chikorita. So yeah, that was my dealer room adventure for Animazement 2024.
And great selection in the dealer room. Their dealer room's really good. Honestly, it could probably use a little more space because it was a little crowded on some of the days where they had like the voice actors in the back because you had people lined up for that. But overall, I thought their dealer room's awesome, and it's again, just everything's really well organized. I can't really say enough about Animazement. I think it's one of the best conventions in America. It's to the point where, it's hard not to just make it a planned annual trip. It's always Memorial Day weekend. Even, with work situations, we're almost always going to be able to get that time off. I would like to look into flying down and back next year just because that drive is not the best. Or, the other option is that we leave on like Wednesday and we drive like 3 or 4 hours and we stop somewhere and then we drive the other 4 hours or take 2 days to come back because that's the kind of the sucky part is knowing that we wanted to come back Sunday. You pretty much have to leave right away. We left 11 o'clock in the morning and I think we got back after 8 maybe, I think. So we made pretty good time, but we do want to talk about the drive back as kind of the last note on, and then we'll kind of get some general thoughts overall at the end. But
another thing I forgot to mention panel-wise, actually, was we did sit in on the Talk Hunter Hunter VA panel.
We did.
The only English VA panel we actually got to see. But Erica Mendez and Keith Silverstein, voices of Gon and Hisoka from Hunter x Hunter. That was actually really good.
Yeah, I totally forgot about it because I forgot I didn't mark that on my schedule.
Yeah, I didn't have it on my schedule originally, so I bypassed it too. But yeah, that was a really entertaining panel.
That was fun, and we don't get to see as many voice actor panels anymore, but that was a really good one, and I think it's great to see them want to come in and just have a good time, and that was kind of what it felt like. And the people there, the people in the audience holding up every random objects they had to try to get their question answered was kind of cool too.
Yeah, that was definitely a good panel.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. But so yeah, we came back on Sunday, and I'm always somebody who keeps a really close eye on the weather. It's especially important when you're traveling 8 hours. And I knew that we had a line of really nasty storms that were going to meet us somewhere on the trip. So kind of the general plan was we were either going to get to Charleston, West Virginia, and then hold up, grab something to eat, basically wait out the storm, or we were going to try to get all the way to Point Pleasant and stop somewhere there if the storm hadn't really moved that far.
Hang out with the Mothman, maybe.
Hang out with Mothman again. But as it turned out, like the storm would have caught us kind of in between the two, which, as it turned out, probably was best that we waited it out. And eventually I'll have some footage from my video when I get it finished that'll show you what it was doing. And this was like after the heaviest rain had stopped. But we ended up stopping in Charleston, West Virginia, and we've seen signs the last couple years on this trip back and forth for Tudor's Biscuit World.
So many biscuit places.
So many.
Through the mountains. It's wild.
Biscuitville. And so we're like, okay, we're going to stop at Tudor's Biscuit World. Luckily, it was open until like 7, so I knew we were in pretty good shape. So first off, when we pulled up, I was not expecting it to be a fast food place, but it clearly is.
Yeah.
It also looked very closed. It was not, but we went in there. Mike wasn't able to get hash browns, unfortunately, on his sandwich.
Yeah, it's weird. They didn't have the normal, like, long, like, hash brown you think of. They had the hash browns as a side, but they could have just thrown them on the biscuit.
Yeah.
But, you know, whatever.
But they had really good food, and like, the people there were friendly people. But, you know, so we kind of took our time eating because we knew we were not going to leave until the storm got through. And we were pretty much done by the time the storm started. And it was strong wind. It was probably 60-mile-an-hour winds.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was really rough out. And so we kind of started talking to the guy behind the counter and kind of making small talk. And, you know, it was kind of fun. And, you know, right as we're kind of like, okay, it's about time for us to hit the road. I think, you know, we're going to be in rain for the next half hour, but we need to get down the road. The guy's like, hang on a minute. So he goes into the back and he comes back out with this bag of like a dozen or so biscuits. And he's like, here, like we make extra and, you know, these are going to go bad. So here's a bag of biscuits. Because we told him it was our first time at Tudor's Biscuit World and we enjoyed the food. So we got a bag of biscuits to bring home with us, which was probably, of all the things that has ever happened on our trips, that is one of the strangest for sure.
Yeah, it was not something I was expecting. It just, you think like, man, these travelers probably need some extra biscuits if they're going to make it home safely. I kind of wonder, like, is that a decision they have every day? Like, who do we give the extra biscuits to? Who gets them today, guys? And like, oh, these two dudes who are driving back to Ohio, we should probably give them to them just in case. And yeah, that they were really good, so no complaints. But that's just not one of those things you expect to have happen.
And I just wonder if it's a case where, like, if you work there and you, like, because I'm sure they all take turns taking the extra biscuits home, but I would think at some point you're like, I really don't want to take biscuits home today. Like, I'm good. Like, I have had enough biscuits. Like, I like those type of biscuits, but I don't like them all the time because they're very dense.
That is not a daily food by any means.
It is not, but it was really good. I know these people will probably never hear this podcast, but, like, shout out to them. And again, it's another one of those things, and we talk about this on these trips, and I don't want to get too philosophical here, but it's just another reminder that, you know, 99% of the people out there are really good people that are really just trying to get through the day. And I feel like because this world has become so chronically online that you only get to hear and see the most negative things, and you just think it's just awful out there. And I think it's another thing, if people don't learn anything else from these podcasts, I want them to know, like, you should travel. You should get out there and see the world. You should meet people. You should take that trip. One, because life is short and you just don't know. And, you know, money, you can make more money. Like, you can work more. The money will come back, but the time won't ever come back. And once it's gone, and you don't know when that's going to be. So, I think it does reaffirm your faith in humanity, that it's like, there are great people out there, just normal people that aren't chronically online. Like, you know, they're out there just living. And to me, that's my favorite part of traveling, the people you meet along the way that, you know, are just good people. And that's why people should definitely take these trips.
Yeah, that and just in general, there's so much cool stuff out there that, you know, I don't know where any potential listeners may live, but, you know, living in rural Ohio, it's like, not that there's anything wrong with that, but there's so much more variety out there if you just get in your car and drive somewhere.
Yeah.
It gives you a new appreciation for, one, just how large this country is, like how much stuff there is out there, and also at times how much nothing there is out there. It's something you have to witness every now and then.
There's a lot of nothing between Washington Courthouse and the Ohio-West Virginia border. Like, there's a lot of nothing. Like, not even like, oh, there's that exit with one gas station. Like, there's no exits. Or if there is an exit, it goes nowhere in particular. Like, it's always that thing, like, does anybody really live out there? And it's like, you know, we've done this trip enough now where you start in your head kind of planning, okay, if we're going to stop, there's a rest stop there, and then there's the gas station on the other side of Rio Grande, the Love station, and then, you know, you get to Point Pleasant, and you've got some options there, and then, of course, you get on the toll roads and West. It's like, you start planning this stuff out, but it's like, yeah, there's a ton of nothing out there, and then you get to the mountains, and it's just curves and winding, and people don't know how to drive, and it's just,
But that's another thing that even if the driving's inconvenient, it's cool to see.
100%. Some of the shots I'll have when I finally get the video up is
Even something like Pilot Mountain or whatever it is, probably not noteworthy as far as highest mountains in the country, but it sticks out and it's cool looking.
And it's really cool on the way back because you really get a good view of it and you get a longer view of it. And it kind of sneaks up on you on the way to Raleigh, but coming back, it's just really neat. And as we've said last year, and I'll echo this, Raleigh's a really cool place. Like if you want to go to a city that it doesn't feel like a city, Raleigh's a great choice. It's just really neat, and it feels like small town, even though it's a big city as well, and very safe. Like I'm sure there are parts that are not safe because there's parts in Blanchester that aren't safe. Like there, it's just we walked down for breakfast both days, and I didn't feel any kind of danger or anything like that. It was very safe, and I definitely recommend if you're an anime fan, you haven't been to Animazement, put it on your calendar. That is a convention that more people need to know about because, like I said, I don't know if it's not the best convention in America. Like our goal maybe to try to figure out what that is, but that's gonna be tough to top for sure.
Yeah, I agree.
Any final thoughts on Animazement, anime in general, anything else? We wrap this up.
It was hard to not feel a little bummed about the OhioCon situation and how it turned out ultimately. I am excited about what the Sakai Guild plans on doing. It'll be interesting to find out more about that. But when you look at Animazement, you're just like, just do that. Look at what they're doing. Do that. Like, just why couldn't OhioCon have been that? I don't know what all goes into, or the people who put into anime conventions enough to like really say, here's what you're doing wrong. This is what you need to replace. But to me, Animazement feels like something where they sit down and say, here are all the different types of fans that we expect. How do we please all of them?
Yeah. And somehow they find a way to do it each and every year, and they deserve a ton of credit for that. So it was a great time. We'll have a video up somewhere soon that'll kind of show you the road trip down and back. It was really a lot of fun. But that's going to wrap things up for this week. Nerdcast Thursdays. Talking anime this week with Animazement. It was a lot of fun. We really enjoyed our trip. Huge thanks to Mike, as always, for joining me on this week's edition. A huge thanks to everybody who joined us live on Twitch or maybe caught the VOD at some point on Twitch or YouTube, or of course you can listen to it wherever you get your podcast each and every week. Big thanks to Stove Lake Media for their continued support of the Nerdcast Empire as we are 63 episodes into this endeavor now. Coming up on Sunday, it's another edition of our Music Weekly show. We are going to be talking about the music from May the 17th. Make sure you join us for that. Really exciting to be back talking good music coming up on Sunday. That's going to wrap things up. Big thanks to everybody who joined us. We will talk to you again on Sunday for another edition of the Nerdcast Empire. And until then, join the Empire, the Nerdcast Empire.